Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. Earlier, I was able to interview Paul Jacob. Paul is a global affairs analyst, but one of the smartest guys I know about American foreign policy and America's history. Nice of him to record this upcoming segment. So let's take a listen, and we'll talk after that. Thank you. Welcome to Around the World with Dane Waters. I am your host, Dane Waters, and I'm honored to have with me Paul Jacob. Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dane. How are you doing?
Great. Okay. Now the world may not know this, but this year, America is celebrating 250 years of being a country. I'm going to have this show and a couple of other shows between now and just so the world knows, that celebration, the birthday of America is July 4th, even though technically I don't know why. But by the way, do you know why July 4th is our holiday?
Well, because that's when they presented the greatest political document in the history of the world. And I don't say that just because it's American, so it's got to be the greatest, but there's no greater political document in the history of the world than the Declaration of Independence, which said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, women too, and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when you think about advancing political liberty, advancing the idea of equality, that I think is the greatest statement ever made. And it was actually finished on the 2nd of July. That's when John Adams, who one of our presidents and so on, thought was going to be the big holiday, but it ended up being July 4th, which is when, makes sense, they presented it to the people of Philadelphia, and then they rode it around. They didn't drive it around. I was about to say they drove it around, but they horsed it around the country and read it from public squares all over America.
Well, that's amazing. So July 4th, 1776 is when America, America started. I mean, that's when our independence started. That's when we measure. So 250 years. So,
Yes.
okay, let me just start with this question. I'm going to pepper this with some history facts as we go through. But given that, it's the greatest document, and I agree with you. Outside the Magna Carta, I would think probably has up there as well, but outside of that. But do you think America in 250 years has lived up to the promise of our founding fathers?
Well, first of all, I think that if you say lived up to the promise, then that's 100%. And nobody, no government could live up to that 100%. No people could live up to that sort of promise and expectation 100%. But I wrote something. I do a daily commentary, and it'll run tomorrow. But there was a poll that just came out, an NBC News poll, that asked Americans if they're proud to be Americans. And at the turn of the century, this century, it feels funny to say at the turn of the century, but anyway, at the turn of the century, it was 75% of Americans who felt either extremely proud or, very proud. It is now down to 56%.
Wow.
It is 90% among Republicans, with 3% saying that they're not very proud or not at all proud. Democrats are much different. Democrats are 29% proud or very proud and to be American, and 36% who are either not very proud or not at all proud to be Americans. And I make the point in this commentary that, look, the country's done, the government, when you look at the different mistakes that have been made, we have every reason in numerous instances to be ashamed of what our government has done. But if you step back and look at the grand scheme of things, I think that the United States of America as a society, as a government, as a people, has done more for the world in terms of advancing freedom and equality and justice than any society in history. It doesn't nullify any of the bad things that have been done. Those are still bad, and we can't be proud of them. But think about what that declaration has meant for the rest of the world. How many people have been inspired by the level of freedom? I know when I was in Hong Kong in 2019, there were a lot of American flags waving. I know that they were reading the Declaration of Independence on Tiananmen Square in 1989. And of course, I think the most obvious example is Japan would have taken Asia, pretty much all of it. Germany had taken virtually all of Europe and a good bit of the Soviet Union at the time. If the United States of America had not become free and prosperous, the world as we know it would be so different today. I don't know how many decades or whether it'd still be Nazi control of Europe and Imperial Japan controlling Asia. But let's step back and say, and you and I were not alive at the time. We didn't have anything to do with it, but a round of applause for the greatest generation. And I always get a kick out of that phrase, the greatest generation. People talk about the World War II generation. And of course, I always want to know which generation you're talking about, because there were two generations involved in that. There was the Eisenhower and Patton and FDR generation. And then there was the generation of people that you and I worked with, Bob Wright in Nebraska and Ed Jackshaw, who stormed Normandy Beach in World War II, and the generation of young people who gave their lives in many cases to advance freedom around the world. So look, it's silly to run around with your chest puffed out as if, oh, I'm an American, so we're so wonderful. It's also even more ignorant to act like America is a terrible, rotten place that's never done anything for mankind, that's never advanced any of our principles. It's a mixed story, but boy, does it lean heavily on the good.
Oh, that's and I agree with you. I think that a lot of people, it's like I even fall into this trap sometimes where I cast an opinion on a country based upon who their leaders are. And I think that once again, I don't know what's in the minds of Democrats, and those numbers come out, there's very depressing. But the reality is, yeah, you may not be happy with our current leadership. You may not be happy with the things we've done. I remember I was doing a speech at the global some peace forum I was doing, and some lady got up in the audience and started accusing America of doing all these heinous crimes. I mean, listen, America, we've done stuff. There's no doubt about it. Our leadership has made bad decisions. Foreign policy is not black and white. But if you look at our country as a whole, you look at what we stand for, you look at the fact that, the democratic principles and what we were founded upon. I mean, the institutions are strong. Some of the leadership may be questionable, but once again, to me, the value of showing how wonderful America is, the fact that we can have leaders of both political parties, of all political parties, that do crazy things, but our institutions survive. And I wish people would look past leadership and think about the institutions as a whole. As a side note, there.
Yeah, Dane, I think one of the issues that undercuts, I think, a lot of, what a great free country. We had slavery for years, and of course, I think there are some people in America today who think America is the only country in the world, in the history of the world, that ever had slavery. And of course, slavery is still with us in a lot of places in the world, so it's not been wiped out. But it's a horrible stain. And yet, at the same time, I look at the fact that how did it end? It ended with hundreds of thousands of white American men putting on a uniform and grabbing a gun and fighting a war to end it. And it doesn't mean that the slavery was, oh, not so bad. It was horrific, but something was done about it. And you can't have the bad and not recognize the good. And then, of course, I look at my own life. I moved from New Jersey, outside of New York in the north, that was supposedly welcoming to blacks until they tried to integrate the schools in Boston. And then all of a sudden we found out that, oh, maybe not so much. But I remember moving to Arkansas, and I remember seeing protests and thinking, oh my goodness, just having tremendous fear for the black preacher I saw on TV demanding civil rights. And it was at a time in which you couldn't really, when I was in high school, it was tough to be friends between races.
Yeah.
And I see how much of that has changed. And today, so many families are mixed race families with mixed race children, or with black, white, with Asian, with we have a melting pot in America. And one of the beauties to me of America is that you can come to America from anywhere in the world, of any religion, of any race, and you can become an American. And there's the old saying that, if you move to China, you don't become a Chinaman. If you move to Germany, you don't become German. If you move to France, you don't become French. And of course, that may or may not be exactly so. I think it is in many of those cases. But if you move to America and you become a United States citizen, which you have the ability to do, you are an American, and you're not partial citizen. You are a full-fledged citizen. And we've just had so many people from around the world come here. It's our strength. And it's one of the most special things about America, not just the fact that we were kind of developed on an idea, but that attracted a certain type of person, and it attracted people from all over the world. So we have the advantage of all those different experiences and all those different people. And it is, I think, our great strength. And of course, there's a lot of debate now about migration and immigration and so on. And look, you don't need to, let battalions of different people come across the border, undetected. But let's never forget that immigration is the great strength of America. And it's unique, I think, around the world. Not totally different. Europe, other places have had immigrants and have absorbed them and assimilated them, but nowhere has it happened on the scale that it's happened in the United States of America.
Well, yeah, America was founded on immigration. I mean, think about it. When the Pilgrims came, and when the Brits came, the Scots came, and everyone came, outside the indigenous population, which, by the way, I will say that we have not treated the Native Americans the way we should have treated them. That's a different conversation, after 250 years. But we are, then, like, when you talk about France, you talk about Italy, you talk about all these, they had their indigenous population, which were Europeans. We, America, was founded 100% on immigration. We were. Okay, from all over the world, whether it's Chinese to the west, and whether it's Europeans to the east, and then they met in the middle. Who knows what happened? But let's go back to, just once again, just historically, just so the audience can know. I mean, America started with the American Revolution. We decided that we didn't want to any longer be part of the British Empire, which I'm sitting in the UK, so I have to be very careful about what I say about that. But after that, and then there was the War of 1812, in which the Brits said, okay, well, we're going to give another shot to take you back, and well, we kicked their butt again the second time, and then
and we were maybe thinking a little bit that Canada looked nice at the time, but yes,
yeah, well, I guess
we
that
didn't
was
invade Canada; they attacked us first.
That's right. And then, then you look to what's happening now. You look at the fact, not now, but then you go to the Civil War. The Southerners call the War of Northern Aggression, depends on what it, but in history books, it's the Civil War. And to me, and I was going to ask you this question, I think if we think about what the most defining moments in American history is, I would say it's the Civil War, because it is. I mean, we very easily, as a society, as a country, could have been divided in half. But that goes to what you're talking about. I mean, we fought over the rights. I mean, it depends on who you listen to. To me, it's about slavery. It's about trying to abolish slavery. The Southerners, which I'm an Alabama boy, people say it's about states' rights. I mean, I think it's both. I don't think it's either or. I think it's both. But I do think that was a defining moment in our country's history. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because you look back at the words I said from the Declaration of Independence, and all men are created equal. And even the founders, Thomas Jefferson, who first penned those words, owned slaves. But he recognized that this was not a good institution. And so there was that paradox, that hypocrisy, and hundreds of thousands, maybe of millions of slaves living in the country, and people who own them, who, of course, there was tremendous wealth. Uh, and what are you going to do? And so, the Civil War was the most horrific war we've had in our history. I mean, we lost more people in the Civil War than we lost in World War II. And so it is, I think, the defining uh, war, and the defining action in our history. And as much as it would have been nice to end slavery without a war like that, we ended slavery. And that's, I think, critical that we were able to do that and move on, because we're a much different country today than, I mean, you could imagine, had slavery continued, or had that war ended with a stalemate, you'd have two countries now, and one of those countries might, to this day, or at least for how long after that, continue to be a slave state.
No, there's no doubt about that. And I would say, listen, when people want to go back in history and say what America endorsed slavery and America didn't give women the right to vote, or or we had child labor laws, or all these issues. Listen, the one thing to me about freedom and democracy, and the great thing about America, it's an evolution. I mean, we have to look at, and when it's an evolution, you look at what makes America strong is the fact that we can evolve. We have mechanisms to evolve, that we as Americans learn to evolve. And this is when we recognize slavery was wrong. You're right. We had to do a war over it. And then we had to, even after that, we still had to go through all the way up into the 60s, into the Civil Rights Act. I mean, luckily, we had people like Martin Luther King Jr., who had the ability, the great thing about freedom of speech, Martin Luther King Jr. had the ability to speak out, and that led to that continued evolution. And then you look at, listen, we, a country, didn't give women the right to vote until which amendment was it? 17th, 19th,
19th,
which was when was that? 19, when was that?
1921.
Right. So if you think about,
1920.
Women in the United States have only had the right to vote for 100 years. But I wouldn't consider those dark moments. I would consider those that they show how amazing our democracy is that we as a nation can engage in these issues, fix the ills of society, and keep moving forward. And many
It,
countries around the world, that's not possible.
and it to me, the real gift that America has given the world is the whole idea of change is possible. If everyone can be shut up and frightened into not saying anything, then harms and ills and evils can last forever. And so it is the beauty of America that change is possible, because people can speak their mind. And when you hear someone say something and you say, "Hey, that's right," all of a sudden people start to get organized, and that's all in our First Amendment. It is something that has again and again led to change that has been positive. And it's easy to kind of look at the world, history, your own life. Oh, we get here, everything's going to be wonderful now. Life is a process, and governments are a process, and societies are a process. And so it's not the idea of, oh, we get to a certain place and then everything's wonderful, because I don't know about you, but that's not the way my life has worked. You get to a place and you think everything's going to be wonderful. If you quit working at it, all of a sudden it's not. So that's really, I think, the challenge is to keep America going and to keep the discussion going. And I think it's what scares Americans some today more than maybe a few decades ago. And that is the partisanship, the social media, anger at each other. It used to be that politicians fought about stuff. and we went and voted. And now we fight along with them. And sometimes I hear people talk on, I work a little bit more on the right. I hear people talk about the left as if they've got horns and as if they're all communists. And really, it's just AOC and Bernie Sanders. No, a little joke there, but we do have now, I think, people in political life who are much more radical on the left, on the right, than in the past. And I think we have a social media environment that is a little bit toxic. And we can throw up our hands and go, oh, it's the end of America. Our best days are in the past. It's a problem like many others we've confronted. We've got to work through it. And we've got to have a certain amount of faith in our fellow man, because really the hope in that Declaration of Independence, which on July 4th will be 250 years old, the hopefulness there that all men are created equal, that we're all in this together. It has changed the whole world, and that's something I think to be very, very proud of. We don't know how this experiment's going to end. We know it's gotten off the rails more than a couple times, but we have a chance. And it seems to me in this life, that's all you can ask for. We have a chance to develop a better world, a more perfect union. Thomas Paine, who's one of my favorite guys, came to the United States. He was literally, I think, in the country only a year, maybe less than a year, when he wrote Common Sense, which was a pamphlet that just spread throughout the colonies. Probably the most read book in the history of the country apart from the Bible. And yet he came from England. It wasn't like he was here forever. He came here because he saw something happening that could change the whole world. And he talked about the chance to start anew, to start the world anew. And that's what America was all about. And I compare that to Pol Pot in Cambodia, who also wanted to start the world anew. He talked about it being year zero, and his starting the world anew caused millions of people in Cambodia to be starved to death, to be tortured to death. What America did in terms of starting anew, not perfect, but it led to prosperity and to more and more people coming here and finding a better life, and not finding a better life, coming here and building their own better life. And so that's the sort of start we got. That's the promise of America, the American dream. So often people talk about the American dream as people getting rich. I may be stupid, but I've never really wanted to be rich. I wanted to do that. I love ideas. I love politics. And the American dream is to live your life the way you want to live it. That's the American dream. And it's all about freedom. It's not about wealth. But lo and behold, when people get to live the life they want to live, or closer to that, it produces a heck of a lot of economic wealth.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, and I think there's two things there, two thoughts there. Number one, I think one of the immigration. Go back to immigration for a second. I think America, the reason we've been so creative, so successful, is because we are a melting pot. We've had people from all over the world of all different strengths to come to our country and to work together to create, what we have, and that's number one. But number two is one thing about America is, yes, I agree 100% with what Thomas Jefferson wrote, and I agree in the and what this country can be. But one thing I think some Americans have forgotten is that freedom isn't free. It's not, you just can't, just because we have these great promises and we have a great country doesn't mean you don't have to work for it. I mean, democracy you have to protect, you have to work for it. And so this is one thing that I hope, that I wish, our elected officials would do a better job of talking about, hey, listen, we have these freedoms, But you know what? You've got to continue to work for them. It's just like anything, like a good marriage. You got to work at it. It's just not free. And then the last thing I want to say about that is that I do believe, when I travel the world, I mean, people ask me if I'm American, and I do run across Americans sadly who say that I'm sad to be an American, similar to what that poll you're talking about. And I always rebut, listen, America is one of the greatest countries in the world. It's not about America, it's about our leaders. If you don't, it's if you want to say I don't like our leadership, that's fine. But to say, I don't know how you can sit there and say I'm sad to be an American. Is that what you're sad because of Mississippi? You're sad because of Alabama? You're sad because of California? I mean, we're a country of 350 million people. I mean, we have a handful of people that are leading our country, and if you disagree with them, then so be it. I can guarantee you that when President Biden was president, there were Republicans saying, I'm sad to be an American. Now that Trump is president, there are
Right.
Democrats saying, I mean, and once again, that's the beauty of our country, the fact that you can say that without being shot, without being killed,
Right.
that kind so listen, we only got a couple more minutes here. I want to ask you, in your opinion, what is the greatest triumph in 250 years of America?
Wow. Wow. That is very tough. If I were to look at it from a worldwide view, I would say the Normandy invasion. Now it's interesting because that was like one invasion, and so it always gets a lot of credit. And the poor guys fighting island to island in the Pacific
Yeah.
against Japan, they don't. It's like they don't get as much credit. And Iwo Jima and some of those things, just incredible. Um, so I would say that from a worldwide perspective, I really think that ending slavery from an internal perspective is probably the greatest achievement. And we have a holiday the end of this week, Juneteenth, which is when there were some blacks held as slaves in Texas, that it took a long time after the after the Civil War, months and months, for them to get notified that, hey, you're free. And that happened on June 19th, and it's called uh, you know Juneteenth, and that now is a national holiday. And I think there's nothing worth celebrating more than ending slavery, which is the antithesis of everything this country stands for. And so I think that's one of the things that I'd like to see increasingly. That has, in my estimation, been way too much of a, it was pushed at a certain time. It was like the Democrats pushed it, so there was like a partisan uh, you know, fight against it, kind of, except they realized you can't fight a holiday on slavery, for goodness sake, on ending it. So I would love to see, between June 19th and July 4th every year, people in America talking about freedom with those two bookends, with the fact that the Declaration of Independence set it up for the whole world to realize in one sentence what should be, and that is people being created equal and having the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then realizing that in the real world, sometimes bad things happen, and sometimes even in a country talking about freedom, there's slavery. And that was ended. And it wasn't ended because some court said, hey, you had to end it. It was ended because people gave their life to end it. And I think to this day we don't respect that. We don't internalize the fact that there's a lot of people who have fought to create racial harmony, to make everybody free of all races, and that is a uniquely, not uniquely American, but that's so much a part of our history, and we ought to take credit for it. And again, as I said earlier, Dane, you and I, through a lot of this, we weren't even on this planet. So not take credit in the sense that, oh, we're so good, but give our society a little bit of credit that we have been through some things and we've triumphed and we've helped the world triumph. And let's get back to work and keep doing that.
No, listen, it's true, and I mean, I think we've definitely, as a country, we've had our challenges, whether it's slavery, or whether it's the assassination of presidents, or whether it's Watergate, or whether it's the Vietnam War, or whatever. I mean, but that's the beauty of our country, is the fact that we have been challenged, and many people argue we're being challenged today. I mean, the reality is these challenges, we have the ability, through our mechanisms, through our institutions, through our freedoms, through our liberties, through our rights, to push back and to fight, to stand strong and stand strong for our country. Listen, no democracy is ever perfect. No, democracy is messy. It's just the reality. But the fact is, I'd rather have that messiness of a democracy than what an authoritarian regime would do, or whether a dictatorship would do. And so I'm willing to accept that I'm not always going to be happy. Our leaders are not always going to do the right things. I'd rather have that and those challenges and trying to right the wrongs than not having the ability to right those wrongs. So anyway.
I was just seeing yesterday Churchill's famous statement about democracy being the worst of all forms of government except all the others. and, uh, and of course, I think it was Churchill who also said that America always gets it right after trying everything else.
That's very true. That's very true. Listen,
But and I should point out that his mother was American, so that's probably why he was such a great Brit.
I didn't even know that. I didn't know that.
Yes,
But anyway, listen, Paul, it's a pleasure. Sadly, we were out of time, but I want to use this as an opportunity to say happy birthday, America. 250 years. Paul and I, well, I was going to say if we add our ages together, are we 250? No, I can't even. I'm an Alabama graduate. What do I know? Anyway, Paul, it's a pleasure. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all you do to make America a great and better place. It's people like you that absolutely keep the dream alive. I found like Martin Luther King, didn't he say keep the dream alive? Anyway,
that's right.
I
He
appreciate
had a
it.
dream. I think it's up to us to keep it alive. But anyway, it's great always talking with you, Dane, and especially as we get close to this 250th anniversary, because it's worth kind of refocusing people on the fact that we've done a lot of great things, maybe some not so great. Let's keep the dream going.
Appreciate that. Well, thanks.